Hello and welcome to Julianne Rudgunas' final project for English 1001. My father has relapsing and remitting multiple sclerosis, a complicated autoimmune disorder that impacts his memory, fine motor skills, balance, reaction time, and much more. There is good days and weeks, but there also are times where it can make doing something you don't think about, like swallowing while drinking and eating, more difficult. As an exercise science major with a strong interest in physical therapy and nutrition, I always like to keep up with exactly what is going on with my dad's health. This inspired me to ask more questions in my classes related to the subject. One day in my Fundamentals of Nutrition class, we were talking about the rules of vitamin D in the body, and it raised the question for me, what is the impact of vitamin D supplementation in autoimmune disorders? I took this further in my evidence-based practice exercise science class by posing the question, are multiple sclerosis patients who are middle-aged, who have a vitamin D deficiency, who follow a vitamin D supplementing routine, compared to those without a regular vitamin D supplementing regimen, at a lower risk for progressive symptoms of the disease? In that class, we only learned how to format research questions and gather articles, but we never took it very far. So rolling into the semester, I still had this question on my mind. In this video, I'll be talking about what MS is, why is vitamin D important, the debate around when to supplement and how much, other information about the impacts of the gut microbiome, and what we assume is the best approach to treating the disease. Vitamin D supplementation may only be effective under certain clinical conditions, rather than a universal treatment, and should be further studied to be used as a supportive modality in treatment of multiple sclerosis. So you may be wondering, what is multiple sclerosis? McGinley et al. 2021 describes MS as an autoimmune-mediated neurodegenerative disease of the central nervous system characterized by inflammatory demyelinization with axonal transection. To break up that very daunting medical jargon, this basically means that MS is a disease that impacts the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. The body attacks itself, eating away at the myelin sheath around the neurons. This is where the nutrients and protection for your brain connections are. This causes issues with misconnections and death of brain cells, which can cause problems with memory, reaction time, and motor activities. It usually starts in young adults, 20 to 30 years old, that develop neuritis, inflammation, or some other neurological symptoms. Usually, this is dubbed clinically isolated syndrome, or CIS, and tends to be the first indicator of possible MS. So you may be wondering, why vitamin D? It may seem kind of random to focus on vitamin D, but in reality it plays a major role in the maturation of neurons, the regulation of different growth factors, and helps with the synthesis of different neurotransmitters. This also means it is involved with immune health because of its neuroprotective properties. Neuron health is a big deal when it comes to neuroplasticity, which is the nervous system's ability to make new connections after possible damage and help to learn new things. Since MS exhibits properties of inflammation and neurodegeneration, and vitamin D exhibits properties of reducing inflammation and influences neuroplasticity, there is a likelihood they are intertwined. Vitamin D helps genes become expressed and their information to be copied, which helps with the secretion of anti-inflammatory properties in the body called cytokines, which in turn helps counteract neurological damage. This gives people with MS an extra supplement to possibly add to their medication regimen to help aid the slowing of the disease progression. So, what is the huge debate around vitamin D supplementation in multiple sclerosis treatment? Can we really confirm that vitamin D plays a role in multiple sclerosis? How high of a dosage can help with progression? Two articles that come to mind when these questions pop up: Thurunova et al. 2025 and Butskven et al. 2023. These articles, published 2 years apart, can help providers better understand the best course of action when prescribing supplementation. Butskven et al. Found that using a dosage as high as 10,000 international units, that there was no significant reduction in disease progression or lesion development. On the contrary, Thuvino et al. Found that a much higher dose of 100,000 international units every 2 weeks led to lower disease activity and fewer brain lesions. So why do these articles disagree? They technically don't disagree with each other. However, the biggest difference is the dosage. One used smaller daily doses and the other used larger doses every 2 weeks in order to rapidly increase vitamin D levels. Also, in Thuvino et al., they have some patients who have a vitamin D deficiency, whereas Butskven et al. Mentioned that maybe those who had a deficiency could have benefited more from their study rather than just their participants who didn't have a deficiency in vitamin D. These differences suggest that vitamin D isn't just a one-size-fits-all solution, that it may work in only certain conditions. The studies aren't necessarily contradicting each other, rather, they are testing different strategies under different conditions. That is why medical research and results can vary so much. Overall, vitamin D may help in managing MS, but only when the dose, timing, and patient condition are right. For some additional information, MS progression isn't controlled just by one factor. Vitamin D is just one piece of a larger biological system. In an article by Cox et al. 2021, they mentioned the microbiome encompasses trillions of organisms that can affect neurological disease by modulating immune cells that traffic from the gut to the brain, secreting neuroactive metabolites, altering endocrine signaling pathways, and triggering afferent neurons. What this boils down to is that the gut microbiome health is extremely important for central nervous system health. Since afferent neurons carry information from the sensory receptors, so the ones that are in your skin and on your hands, basically wherever you get sensation on your body, and they are found all over the body, and then the afferent neurons take that information from your peripheral and bring it all the way up towards your central nervous system, so your brain and spinal cord. So if a patient has MS, their gut microbiome may be off and signaling the wrong information to the brain when the body goes into overdrive. Because both vitamin D and the gut microbiome are factors in MS, it gives the broader idea that it isn't just a simple disease to be treated, rather a very difficult disease to navigate for providers and patients alike. Now for my favorite part, the real-world application. So how does this apply to maybe other patients and patients like my dad? Though I'm not a medical provider yet, this information I've gathered can truly help my dad. Since he is going through another relapse of his disease and has new lesions on his spinal cord and in his brain, he could take some of this research I've gathered and ask his provider about it. Much of this research is relatively new, the most recent article being published in 2025. This lets us know that the research is actively being conducted on the topic and the disease is just now being investigated more. We may not be able to take action right away to help prevent further progression of my dad's disease because of the lack of longitudinal studies and possible long-term effects. But it does give my family hope that he will continue cycling on and be an airplane pilot in the future with emerging modalities of treatment. Besides focusing on therapeutic modalities for MS patients, we can continue to also help support the families of patients with autoimmune disorders. Multiple sclerosis camp as a kid was a great way to give me a head start into understanding how my dad's disease works and how it works from day to day. It has been a large contributor to the subject and field of study. To conclude, MS is such a unique autoimmune disease with many moving parts. There isn't just one way to approach and treat the disease. Rather, we need to gather as much information as possible to have options for patients to use supportive modalities along with their actual MS medications. Vitamin D supplementation may only be effective under certain clinical conditions, rather than a universal treatment, and should be further studied to be used as more of a supportive modality in treatment of MS. Thanks for listening and watching.